Mike Dell's World number 383 for September 21st, 2022. This podcast was meant for educational purposes only. Void where prohibited. Some assembly required. Batteries not included. Items may be closer than they appear. Contents may settle during shipment. Use only as directed. No other warranty expressed or implied. Do not use while operating a motor vehicle or heavy equipment. Subject to approval. This is not an offer to sell securities. Apply only to affected area. May be too intense for some listeners. For recreational use only. All models over 18 years of age. No user serviceable parts inside. Freshest if used before the date on carton. Subject to change without notice. All times approximate. Simulated picture. Breaking seal constitutes acceptance of agreement. For off-road use only. As seen on TV, one size fits all, contains a substantial amount of non-tobacco ingredients. Colors may, in time, fade. Slippery when wet. Office use only. Edited for television. Keep in a cool, dry place. Process promptly. List was current at the time of recording. Not responsible for direct, indirect, incidental, or consequential damages resulting from any defect, error, or failure to perform. Penalty for private use. Substantial penalty for early withdrawal. Do not write below this line. Your canceled check is your receipt. Avoid contact with skin. Sanitize for your protection. Slightly higher west of the Mississippi. Beware of dogs. Contestants have been briefed on some questions before the show. You must be present to win. No purchase necessary. Use only in a well-ventilated area. Keep away from fire or flame. Approved for veterans. Price does not include taxes. Not recommended for children. Pre-recorded for this time zone. Reproduction is strictly prohibited. No solicitors. No alcohol, dogs, or horses. No anchovies unless otherwise specified. First pull up, then pull down. Call toll-free before digging. Driver does not carry cash. Some of the trademarks mentioned in this product appear for identification purposes only. Decision of the judges is final. This supersedes all previous notices. Now back to your regularly scheduled podcast. No podcasters, plants, or animals were harmed in the making of this disclaimer. Well, let's hope not anyway. Yeah, I've been using that disclaimer for a long time. I forget how long ago I recorded that. I think I want to say probably 10 years ago. Maybe not quite that long ago, but it was a while. It was on my old MXL mic down in the old studio in the basement back before I knew what I was doing. But it turned out all right. Anyway, this is Mike, and welcome to Mike Dell's World 383. If you're keeping track. It's been about a month, actually exactly a month since I put out an episode. I do mean to do this a little more often, but man, times are busy. Let's see, since the last time we talked, I've been to Dallas, I don't remember now. I've been doing some traveling anyway. I've been to Columbus, in Dallas, I think. Let's see. When was the company meeting? It's been a while. I guess the company meeting was before the last episode. Or was it? No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. Okay. All right. I'm screwed up. So yeah, I was at Columbus before the last episode, and then I went to Dallas right after the episode. And that was a fun trip, sort of. Of course, Dallas was getting torrential rains during my flight, so I didn't make it there on the day I was supposed to. I ended up getting stuck in Chicago, which wasn't too bad because the airport, Sheridan, it was the same hotel chain that I was scheduled to be in Dallas, so I just traded one night in Dallas for the night in Chicago, and flew out the next morning, and all was well, so it wasn't bad. And I got my fix of Chicago hot dogs, so that was okay. Uber Eats is a wonderful thing when you don't have wheels and don't feel like paying to ride somewhere to eat. So I just had them deliver me a couple of hot dogs and a 6-pack, and I was styling. And the trip from up here down to Chicago was unique, I think, or at least unique to me. I flew down on a little tiny airline called Cape Air, and it reminded me, I flew from Manistee, Michigan, which is a dinky little airport, and it reminded me very much of the old NBC show Wings. And when I mentioned that to somebody, in fact, I mentioned it to the pilot on the way home, since I was sitting a foot and a half from him. I said, this reminds me of that old TV show Wings. And he says, well, we do service that island, whatever it was. I think, I don't remember what island it was, but Massachusetts there. Anyway, they said, well, we service that island, and that TV show was based on Cape Air. So ironic. But it was kind of cool. Got to fly down on, some Italian airplane, Islander. It had like 8-9 seats, something like that. A little twin piston engine airplane. And on the way back, I flew back in a Cessna 404. I never even knew what those were, just a Cessna twin. And I sat literally right behind the co-pilot's seat, which was empty. It was just one pilot. And got to chit-chat with the pilot and all that good stuff. And he even joked with me. He says, well, maybe I'll give you the landing in Manistee. But anyway, that was uneventful. And then I flew, to Dallas and back on American Airlines, which, yeah, whatever. They're okay. And had a good time in Dallas. Had a little controversy. I'm not sure you probably heard about it, but you might have. With Ben Shapiro showing up at the conference, and some people freaked out because they didn't like Ben Shapiro. I won't go into much more than that, other than it was a definite shit show, and as far as the publicity for Podcast Movement was. But I think they've apologized, and I do believe Daily Wire, which is Ben's network, has accepted that apology, or at least I think so. So we'll see. And maybe they learned a little lesson. Who knows? The old saying, go woke, go broke. I think that might apply. Hopefully not. I like Podcast Movement, and I'm friends with the owners of it. And it wasn't the owners of Podcast Movement that put out the apology for Ben showing up, and then it was the owners of Podcast Movement that put out the apology to Ben for freaking out on him. But like I said, if you want to know more about that, check out the Daily Wire. And it's one of their backstage, not this last one, but the one before. So check out the recording of Backstage at the Daily Wire, and they go into that whole thing right at the beginning. And it was really quite shocking was the word that we used while we were at the show. It kind of sucked the energy out of the one day there, but it recovered. But stuff happens. People all have opinions, and half of them are wrong. What half? I'll let you decide. But anyway, so yeah, I've been busy with travel and work stuff, and we've been putting out a lot of stuff at Blueberry that's new. If you've been to Mike Dell's world lately, actually this episode, hopefully I'm trying out a new thing called Descript to edit and transcribe my show. So if it all works as planned, you're going to see a CC button on the player at Blueberry, and you can hit play and then hit that CC button, and it'll show the transcript, and it'll highlight as I'm talking everything I'm saying. So kind of like closed captioning. Well, it is closed captioning, and we're the first audio company that's done that. So it's unique. I'm trying to get out of the habit of saying things like very unique, or because there is no variable of unique. Unique is unique. So not that I speak perfect English all the time, but I try. Let's see what else has been going on. Having a little bit of vehicle drama. No, not anything huge, believe me, but it's worked out a little bit strangely this week because I have to travel down to Grand Haven for a funeral. A friend of mine's mother passed away last week, and The funeral is tomorrow on Thursday, so this is Wednesday evening. My wife's already down there helping plan the party and memorial and all that stuff, so she's down there probably cooking, I'm guessing. But my pickup truck, the typical northern Michigan vehicle, has a little bit of rust. That's just the way they are when they get older. This one's not that old, it's a 2013, but close to 10 years old, I guess. So depending on when it was built, might already be 10 years old. I didn't look at the manufactured date. But anyway, what happens with these things is snow, ice, salt, and crap get packed all over the underside of the car or truck in this case, and the fuel pump has a steel plate that locks into the plastic gas tank, and then all the lines and electrical stuff and the fuel pump all go through that hole with that plate on the top. And what's happened with my truck is that plate has rusted out to the point where now it's leaking, and it's leaking enough that I have to get it fixed. And so can't drive the truck, and he couldn't get me into the shop until Monday, so I still got over the weekend. And I've got to travel down to Grand Haven, as I mentioned. And so I borrowed my folks' convertible. They have a little convertible Volkswagen Beetle, and I drive it home. And my wife dropped me off out there, and I drove it home. And as I was driving it home, it was spit and sputter once in a while. I was like, I didn't think much of it. It didn't get driven a lot this year, so who knows? Might just need to get the cobwebs worked out of it. So I didn't think much of it. And then on Tuesday, I did that on Monday. On Tuesday, I went up to the store and, pick up some groceries and stuff in the Beetle, and I put the top down. Figuring why not? It's a nice day. So I put the top down, I go to the store, I come back from the store, and I park it, and I haul the groceries in, and then I thought, I better put the top back up because we got acorns falling out of the trees and stuff. I don't want the car full of acorns. So I go out there and I try to start the car because, I like to run the roof when it's running so that it doesn't run the battery out. But I tried to start it, and the operative word there is try. It didn't work. So I fiddle-farted around with it. I plugged in my scan tool, and it gave a code for speed sensor, no signal, and some other thing that had to do with the catalytic converter, which those are normal because that thing had its lights on, or the check engine light anyway, because it's an old car and that just happens. So anyway, I clear the codes. I try to start it again. Won't start. All right, so I call my dad and say, hey, Beetle's not starting, and here's what I found, and told him the code and all that stuff. And he says, well, everything ran perfectly last time, whatever. Typical dad response. And they happen to be over at Costco, which is about a mile away, so they come over, mom and dad, and he tried it and looked at it, and oh well. And so he called the tow truck and had it towed to the shop that he goes to. And in the meantime, I'm carless because my wife had already left for Grand Haven. And at this moment, we don't have a third car. I had to trash my old van. I went to the junkyard. I drove it there, but it wasn't. It needed some stuff that I just didn't want to spend the money on, and then it was a rust bucket, so time to get rid of it. And we hadn't got around to replacing our spare car. I always like to have a spare because I drive older cars, and I do that because I don't want huge car payments. And part of owning older cars is to have at least a spare available because once in a while one of them's going to break, and it's a lot cheaper than car payments to fix cars most of the time. So here I am, carless, no big deal, and I didn't have to go anywhere until later today. And my mom and sister were going downstate, so my sister drops her car off, for me to use, and that's all fine and dandy. So tomorrow I'll drive my sister's car down to Grand Haven for the funeral, and that'll be that. And another related note, my sister's son, my nephew, Zach, picked up a winter beater because he's got one of those, an older Lexus hot rod car. I don't know, LS 300 or ES 300, whatever, the hot rod one with the 6-cylinder and the manual transmission. And he didn't want to drive it in the winter because it's in pretty good shape. And so he bought a winter beater, a 99 Corolla manual transmission. It needs a little bit, needs some struts and door handles and typical Corolla things, but it was in decent shape. And then my uncle passed away a couple weeks ago, and my aunt called Zach and asked if he wanted his old car. It's a rather nice Chrysler 300. So he jumped at that and got it for a cheap price, and it's a nice car, and he got a hell of a deal. So now he's got this Corolla that he doesn't need. And he's a mechanic at the Toyota dealer, so he was going to fix it up, sell it. Well, I found out about that. I went and checked it out, and I agreed to buy it from him, but I still got to wait till he gets the struts and the door handles and whatever else he wanted to do to it. He bought all the parts. He just has to get time to do it. So in the next couple of weeks, I will have my spare car, and as a bonus, I'll have one with a manual transmission, which I will enjoy thoroughly because I haven't really driven many manuals lately. Of course, I drove Zach's Lexus home when we went to pick it up, or part of the way anyway. And so I got to drive that. That's the only time I've driven a stick shift in quite some time. I think the time before that I got to drive a Focus ST, I think it was, down at the Ford test track when I was writing for Geek News Central. I got to go on a junket for Ford down at the test track, and that was a lot of fun. Got to drive just about everything Ford made at the time. I want to say that was 2015 maybe, or 2014, something like that. But it was fun. We got to drive a whole bunch of cars, and they even had some Nissans and Toyotas and stuff for what they call comparative drives around the track. And they set up an autocross track and an off-road track for the trucks. So I got to drive a Raptor on the off-road track, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. But the only stick shift that I'd driven down there was that Focus ST or RT or RS or whatever the fancy Focus was. And so hadn't really driven a lot of stick shifts lately. When I was a kid, it's all we had. It's all anybody had that I knew, for the most part. I mean, my uncle had an old van that had automatic transmission, but I didn't know very many people that had automatics. This was in the early 80s. And so it was just, pretty much everything was a stick shift, unless it was, some, full-size truck or some beast of a car. But for the most part, everything I drove, I mean, I learned on a 64 Volkswagen Beetle, which was old at the time. Come on, 20-something years old. And my first vehicle was a Chevy pickup that had a 6-cylinder and no power anything. I mean, no power steering, no power brakes, no air conditioning, no power windows, no cruise control, AM radio. It was a truck, and had a 3-speed column shift manual transmission. And so I up until I think the first automatic that I owned was when I lived out in Idaho. I bought a Cutlass for my then wife, my first wife. And every once in a while I would drive that. And then later on we had a Camaro that had a automatic, but everything else I had was stick until I got the Imperial. Yeah, that big old 1970 Imperial I had as a toy car. Of course, that was automatic. But I also had a manual Corolla and a Mazda pickup that was manual at the time. So then the next vehicle after the Mazda was a Ford truck. It was just automatic, and we've had all automatic since then. So it'll be interesting to have a somewhat daily driver stick shift. Have to get used to that again, but it'll be fun, even though it's a Corolla. I mean, they're kind of the most vanilla, boring cars on the planet, but with stick shift, it's a little bit better. And this thing's in pretty decent shape. It's a little rusty, but what do you expect for a 23-year-old car in northern Michigan? But they're solidly built, and the chassis is good, and most of the body panels are good too. It's just a little bit around the edges that's got some rust on it, but it's not nearly as rusty as that old van was. And interior's nice. It needs a door panel on one side, and all the door handles, interior and exterior. That's a typical Toyota problem. My Camry that I had that same problem. The exterior door handle broke, and the way I fixed it is I took a piece of strapping, wide cloth strapping, and made a loop and screwed it into the mechanism on the outside. So I just had a loop, and I just grabbed that loop, and she'd open right up, no problem. And then come to find out, that's what Porsche does on the Boxster. At least they did back in the, when they first came out. The interior door handle is just a loop of cloth. So it's kind of funny. I put Porsche door handles on the Camry. But anyway, I'm getting far afield on vehicular pursuits. Still plan on doing the auto history podcast, but being as busy as I've been, I haven't had a chance to launch it. I've got a couple of good interviews in the can and got a couple more scheduled, so we'll get that going. Definitely want to do that and explore some automotive history. I think maybe the Corolla would be a good one because they've been around for a long time. I think since 1970, I want to say, in the U.S. I don't know, overseas might be more. But they're by far the best-selling car in the world now. Overall, they've made, I want to say, over 30 million of them with the Corolla nameplate. So it's pretty impressive. When the Volkswagen, I think, got to 20 million or something like, or 15 million, 20 million, something like that. And the Ford Model T made it to 15 million. So, yeah, we'll see how much longer they keep making the Corollas. Of course, they're nothing like they used to be. Too many whiz-bang stuff. That's another reason I like buying older cars, is not as much computer-controlled crap. That 2013 Chevy's got enough. I mean, I like the truck, don't get me wrong, but I could do without a lot of the computery stuff. Although I do love my sister's car. Hers is a Toyota, newer one. RAV4, which is a little less SUV, but it has radar cruise. Oh man, do I love that. I wish I could add that to a car, aftermarket, but I don't think that's possible. But the radar cruise is awesome. You set the cruise and you just follow along and you just keep up with traffic. It's pretty slick. I rented a Ford one time to go down to Columbus that had that, and it also had the lane keeping and all that. So basically, you didn't have to do anything to keep it in the lane. And even if you just hit the turn signal, to change lanes, just tap it, and it would blink 3 times. And then if it was clear, it would merge left, pass whatever slow vehicle was in front of you. You'd hit the turn signal, it would merge right on its own. And I drove all the way from Grayling, Michigan to the state line, or exit 5 down south of Ann Arbor, without touching the gas or the throttle on that car. Because it stayed on the freeway and it slowed down, even went into a traffic jam, and the car comes to a complete stop. And then when the car in front of you takes off, it takes off again. And it's really quite something. So that is one fancy whiz-bang thing I wish I could get, but I'm not paying $50,000 for a new vehicle. Just not going to happen. Unless I hit the lottery, there's just no way in hell I'll ever have a $50,000 new vehicle. I'll wait till some of the newness wears off and buy one later. That's usually the better way to go because, again, maintenance and repairs on vehicles most of the time are cheaper than car payments. Now, if I blow an engine on a car that I've got paid off and it's not worth putting an engine in, I just junk it and get another one. It may not be the best way to do it, but it's the way I'd do it. Let's see. Yeah, other than that, it's been a pretty nice summer. Getting a lot of stuff done around the house here, mainly just sort of spring cleaning things. I got the fence up in the backyard, so that now I have a little privacy again since they built those houses behind us. And so I put up a 6-foot privacy fence, and that keeps the dogs from barking at the neighbors back there and all that. So that's a good thing. And again, I have some privacy in the backyard, so when I don't feel like going all the way into the house, well, I can just use a tree next to my office here. And I'm not going to get into the politicky stuff. There's just a lot of that going on. I don't know. It's I think we're living in clown world, watching some of the headlines, and I still don't watch the news on TV, except for every once in a while I'll turn on the local news if I know something's going on. But for the most part, I get my news from a couple of daily podcasts and some online sources. And, if anything big happens, I hear about it, but I'm not going to look for it, and I don't want to sit through all the drug ads and all that stuff. It's just a waste of time. And I actually, find I have a lot more time. I'm not watching a lot of traditional TV anyway, especially not the news. But anyway, all right. Well, I'm going to just call this a quickie update and let you guys get on with the next podcast. But I do want you to go check out MikeDellsWorld.com on this episode and check out that closed captioning thing. Let's see if it works on this episode. It should be the latest episode if you're listening to this anytime in September or October. Although I hope to have another episode before then. Come on, I got some things to talk about. So anyway, we'll catch you next time. And again, check out MikeDell.com for any updates I might have that don't include a podcast episode. Catch me later.